investigations and stakeholder engagements across all provinces. The public hearings provide an opportunity for stakeholders to submit additional evidence and to also respond to the issues raised in the statement of issues and the terms of reference. We have started with the public hearings in Gauteng, followed by the Western Cape, and then KwaZulu-Natal, and this is the 4th province in which we are conducting the hearings. The schedule with information on dates and venues is available on the Commission's website. Before we begin with today's session, we'll just like to recap the rules of procedure that are applicable to this hearing. The formal sitting of the inquiry will be open to the public at all times, except when the chairperson rules that part of the proceedings will be closed on grounds related to confidentiality or for any other reason deemed justifiable in terms of the Competition Act. All sessions will be recorded and streamed on YouTube, save for those sessions or parts of sessions that are closed. In order to allow for the proper ventilation of issues, the chairperson or the panel members, as well as evidence leaders, may pose questions to any person making oral submissions or to any witness. The chairperson will not permit any person, neither personally nor through legal representative, to put questions to any witness or any person making oral submissions during these public hearings. In the event that any stakeholder has an objection, comment, or question in respect of any submission made during these proceedings, that stakeholder must submit the objection, comment, or question to the inquiry in writing, and the inquiry will attend to such objection, comment, or question at an appropriate time. In order to manage time, we usually allow only one representative of a group or entity to make representations. But where arrangements have been made in advance, we do allow different representatives to address different topics where appropriate arrangements have been made with the panel in advance. The following protocols are applicable to stakeholders who are making submissions. Where necessary, stakeholders may claim confidentiality as outlined in Section 44 of the Competition Act. Stakeholders should also note that in terms of Section 72 of the Competition Act, failure to answer fully or truthfully is an offense in terms of the Competition Act. In terms of Section 73 of the Competition Act, it is also an offense to fail to comply with the Competition Act. Lastly, stakeholders should also note that there may be summons should the Commission believe that any person is able to furnish information related to the inquiry. Once again, I wish to welcome everyone to this hearing. I hope that over the next 2 days in this province, we will be able to have meaningful and robust engagements about issues in the land-based public passenger transport industry in this province. We again wish to reiterate that this industry is the backbone to our economy, providing mobility to over 70% of the South African population. A well-functioning, reliable, and efficient public transport system is therefore not only necessary but is vital to achieving a growing and inclusive economy. Today is the 12th day of the hearings, and the date is the 10th of July 2018. We will receive at this stage a submission from Santaco, the Santaco structure, which is based here in Mpumalanga. Welcome to the inquiry, sir, and thank you very much for coming. There should be a piece of paper in front of you. You may take the oath or the affirmation.
Thank you very much. Can I stand up? Or can I stand? Or
No, it's fine. You can just sit down. It's okay.
all right. Muntu Moses Kama, I swear that the evidence that I shall give, I shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kam. If you could first start by briefly explaining what your position is within Santaco, and just explain the structure of Santaco that you represent.
Thank you very much, Chair. My position in Santaco, I'm a spokesperson of Santaco Mpumalanga. Santaco is the body that represents taxi operators. That body was formed in 2001 to help operators and stop the conflict that was happening around the country, to make all taxi operators to belong in one body with one common vision, one common goal.
Yeah, I understand you have prepared a submission. You can take us through your submission, Mr. Kam.
Thank you, Chair. A is based on licensing, road and entry regulations. One, as stipulated from the National Land Transport Act, that indicate that each road is managed by the relevant transport authority, but the PRI has allocated some road to various associations in the province. The above duplication has contributed to a number of conflicts that eventually create two centers of power. Two, the new development by each developer shall allege the public transportation needs with the transport authority as per the area of jurisdiction. More so, before the taxi association could consult the municipality on the new development, they will eventually invade the taxi rank facility, which when their areas of operation. 3, taxi operators are governed by the Act from time to time, which also determine the specific period through legislation, which talks to upliftment of the moratorium through the process of the be legally or the semi-legally. The above application window also determined from the submission of the applications as per the needs analysis. During 2001, in August, there be a legal process which allocates the vehicle that were not having operating license, and later closed afterwards. Then in 2009, other chapter of semi-legal was expected to the operators as on request. 4, each member who wish to be a member in good standing should follow the above criteria. Register with both the Taxi Association and the Office of the Registration and Monitoring be in the position of valid operating license and position of the complaint vehicle that meet safety specification, to be disciplined and behave humanity. B, price setting mechanism. The price increase is actually informed by the random increment of fuel and other commitments that are in line with taxi business. The time frame could not be proper controlled because it may effort of be affected once in 4 years. Indeed, the passenger will consider the most affordable transportation mode. In most cases, trains and buses are preferable to be the cheapest on the basis of being subsidized. I think here you remember, Chairperson, taxi industry, they don't receive subsidy, although subsidy is specific to the individual transport users. As a taxi operators, we are not getting any subsidy, which results for the taxi industry to be difficult to compete with the other companies. The price mechanism in the taxi industry is efficient, not balanced or benefiting the operators actually when comparing the number of kilometers and travel daily with the amount provided as the daily taking by the drivers. The above statistics frequently contributing to the increased reposition of minibus taxis by the financial institution. Transformation. Other role players in the transport, including government and the private sector, usually apply their own assessment in transforming all the transportation of passengers without informing the relevant role players. Actually, however, it is going to affect them. The above has been picked up during the implementation of the rapid transporters, which are finally complied to be out of the business as informed by the following criteria of participating to those networks. The growth of operators is mostly prohibited to the supply of minibus taxis. 3. If indeed the government aimed at protecting the current operators to sustain more on the taxi business, international platform to address the subject should be established. Control system or of generating operating license be followed as per the investigation of the need analysis. Basically, the private sector or suppliers should consult the taxi industry every time when they considering increase on minibus for the purpose of benefiting everybody involved. D. Competition dynamic. The current government has failed the taxi operators in regulating the NTTT resolution entered during the formalization of the taxi industry from 1999. There has created a platform in which trains and buses be given the best preference, and they also expected from being inspected as compliance when compared to the manner applied to the minibus. 2. Poverty, power strategy, and existing fleet have played a major role in the competition dynamic in the taxi industry at large. Majority of the taxi operators will be forced to compete with their colleagues internally, even if they can't meet with installment impossible to them by the financial institution. On top of that, poverty has also contributing for them to observe people from the different institutions which have resigned from the working place to consider the saturated in the taxi industry. 3. In the meeting that currently status to remain in the current business, taxi operators are obligated to utilize the affordable fleet that is equal promotable to the pocket as results that ending up completing themselves with the member that can afford expensive fleet virus to fleet that can be manufactured by the countries which provide new unroadworthy vehicles from China or Russia. Some of the fleet could not compete with the South African weather condition. We've mentioned like Onyatse and Ipubeze and so forth. The competition which is obtained from the passenger, it's selected their preference mode of transport has created the vacuum of competition amongst different taxi associations which ending up fighting or specific route and eventually create the barriers which they counterpart which come to be act that make provision of the routes by the transporting authority. 5. The most controllable and frustrating position of the routes is to the manner in which corrupt officials from the provisional regulated entity with issue operating license to the different taxi association with the same destination. From an example, in the Bushbuck Ridge, 3 taxi associations are found in the have operating from one rank facility to the same area of departure. This absolutely means that policy on regulations are not considered before executing. Second, the government is giving recognition to the federal structures that establish themselves to integrate to violence. This is also confused as the result of the government initiative to establish the only mouthpiece of the taxi industry in Durban in 2001. Here we are trying to elaborate on the conflict. We navigate where the conflict starts. If the government support the federal structures, that thing lead the industry to have a conflict. The impact of the PRT implementation to the taxi industry on operating license, it's also bringing poverty when the act regular for the surrounding of operating license by the taxi operators to have a share at the PRT operations. Finally, the payment that are paid specific for the arrangement rapid out taxi operators from the business, and those arrangements at all remain not honor the attention as such as access of infrastructure. Most of the rank facility are become the white elephant because they are allocated on the space that has been identified by the municipality to the involvement of the taxi association. The bone of the contention in which the taxi industry can generate income is to operate on the platform that will be favorable by the commuters. Actually, the areas that meet the point of satisfaction that has been referred as the better understanding of the customer relationship. Contracting to the bus operators. Neglected by the government on transport authority has escalated to reduce the lifespan of the operating license for the taxi operators. The above has been integrated purposely to transform all those licenses from indefinitely to the license which a period of 5 years to 7 years, depending on the criteria applied, that will be subject to renew. Moreover, the operating of force by which legislation that has took away the scholar transportation from the taxi industry and allocate to the government official to benefit from operators' coffers. The taxi operators are forced to operate on the spots or areas that will vandalize the minibus as a result of bad road condition. This experience is upon by the avoiding time that it's against the passengers when utilizing the public transport. The rank facility should also be contained in the spot which allow passengers will walk short distance to the public transport facility. On the other hand, the minibus will also eventually following the passenger by accommodating them for current and the future purpose to contain for the best entrepreneurship through engagement with various stakeholders, including the government. The taxi industry is currently claiming its position that is take to the National Taxi Tax Team resolution, whereby all taxi operators should be respected as applied to the transportation network of other public transport system. I conclude, if all the above input will be attended effectually and effect, so all the frustration aimed at manipulate the current status of the taxi industry will be eliminated. Therefore, enhanced transformation on requesting will better the lives of all operators by eventually of application, but to Pili recommendations. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kama. I see you are joined by a colleague. I assume that it's your colleague. If you can also just please introduce yourself and welcome to the inquiry, and thanks for coming. Please switch on the mic as you do so. Yeah, it's now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kosa J from MPTC rep. Thanks.
If you can just say, what is NPTC?
Oh, Mpumalanga Provincial Taxi Council.
Is it related to Santaco?
Yes.
And what is the relationship between the Mpumalanga Taxi Council and Santaco?
Yeah, actually, MPTC, it started from the region, then the province, and the national. So MPTC is a provincial structure.
All right. There should be a piece of paper in front of you. You may take the oath or the affirmation. You can choose whether you want to take the oath or the affirmation.
I, Kosa Jonathan, swear that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the holy truth, and nothing but the truth. So, help me God.
Thank you very much. Your surname is Mr. Jonathan?
My surname is Kosa.
Kosa, oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kosa. Mr. Gama and Mr. Kosa, before I hand over to the evidence leaders to ask you some questions, I just wish to clarify two issues. The first one is, if you could just give us roughly an indication of the total number of vehicles which your members have in the province, just roughly, not the exact numbers if you don't have those.
I won't give you a correct figure, but plus or minus 30,000 vehicles that we have.
Servicing the entire province?
Yes.
And secondly, what I also wish to clarify from you is, we know that, I mean, it's nationally, the taxi industry, minibus taxi industry in particular, is servicing almost 70% of the population nationally. So in relation to Mpumalanga, do you have an indication as to what percentage of commuters are serviced by the minibus taxi industry? Just very roughly.
I think in 100% we are also servicing 60% in Mpumalanga, yes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ngobeni?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr. Kama and Mr. Kosa. Maybe just to start, I just want to firstly try and understand the first point that you raise in your submission, which is the question of a duplication of the allocation of routes to various associations. Maybe just to explain how it works in this province. So your members would apply for to service a particular route to the what you refer to as the PRI, and the PRI would also receive a similar application from another association. And I guess maybe here you're referring to, maybe just to ask, are you referring to the members and operators who belong to another association which is not affiliated to Santaco?
Thank you. In terms of duplication of routes, before the association is registered, they're supposed to have routes. It's association because they have routes to operate. And when we follow the criteria of applying the operating license, we apply as individual under the association. So if the association applies a new routes, the PRI currently, they take a team to do visibility study, something like that, to check the demand on that route. But in the current situation, what we see a lot of association operating in the same route, although there's other association that operating. That's where the duplications come in. And it creates also the conflict, because Association X operating that route, and later we see Association B come in to operate the very same routes. So that it's caused a lot of conflict, because the profit that will be generated by that association, it's no more the same profit. And in terms of the number of passengers, we are transporting same number, but due to the fact of this other association now, they given an operating license that must also take part to operate same route, we must share the passengers. It's lead to vehicle to get repossessed by the bank, because before the bank give you a fund to buy a vehicle, they do a route assessment to check your routes, how profitable it is. That's where they can able to finance you. But when Association B come in, automatically it reduces your profit in that route.
And maybe just to understand further, so how do you become aware of the process at the PRI? How are you informed of new applications to the route? Because I trust, it appears to me that you only become aware of this duplication when you now see operators on the same route where other associations are already operating. So the question is, because there's an objection process that is catered for in terms of, the pre-processes. So the question that I have there is to try and find out from you as Santaco as to how are you informed of the various applications that are brought to the PRI before the PRI makes a decision on whether or not to grant an operating license on that particular route?
Before, we used to see advert on government gazette Would Association X apply this route? But in the current situation, when we check Government Gazette, we don't see any application. During that time, they will give us at least a time to object that specific route. But now, vis-a-vis the new act and the new legislation, that all association, before granted a certain route, must have a recommendation also from the municipality side. But what we see, we don't see operators have such letter from the municipality as a recommendation, because the municipality, it's know exactly the population and the people that are staying around on that area. So it knows exactly how many taxis must operate there. Other operators, we see them just operating without having an a recommendation from the municipality. Also, can I give you an example? When we apply a new route as a taxi industry, we must go to the municipality and get a recommendation from the municipality. But on the bus side, when we ask the municipality, they follow the same criteria. We are not getting a clear answer, of which they give them without giving the very same criteria that we as operators were given.
And we're going to see the municipality and the province as part of these engagements, these public hearings. What do you have as recommendations and what would you like us to tell them to solve this particular issue of allocation of routes to various associations? And I think as part of the solution, I'm more also interested in hearing what form of communication you would like to see coming from the municipality in order to make sure that you are well informed of various applications that are brought by various associations on the same routes.
I think, Chairperson, one, we must get the same treatment as operators. Can be a bus operator or a taxi operator, but when we do an application of an operating license, we must follow the same criteria. We must have the same treatment. Not like us as taxi operators, they need us to provide with the recommendation from the municipality. But this other part, they don't require any documentation from the municipality. And also, our understanding, the new act, the NSST, is talk about road-based operating. That's why we have a road-based operating license. But this other part, they operate with radius operating license. So it's come to our attention as taxi operators how the act favor other part, they don't favor the other part. If we can have a body that represents us in the pre to look when we put application and represent taxi operators in the pre, at least maybe we can minimize a lot of things there, because we thought there's something wrong in the pre.
And then just the next one on, you then mentioned the question of the upliftment of the moratorium, as part of your submission. What I'm more interested in, firstly, is to find out when it was imposed and why, the reason why it was imposed. That is the first part of the question.
Yeah, I think that question maybe the department, they can answer, because it's the only people that put the moratorium. While we see the demand as an association, there is a need of operating license. But the moratorium, it's from the department side. They put moratorium. while we see the demand. And that thing, if you can check, the treatment are not the same, because we see this other part, they bring new fleet. But we as taxi operators, if we want to bring new fleet, they won't give us new operating license.
And sorry to interrupt, the other, you're referring to the buses?
Yes, because our competitors here, although it's not a fair competition, it's the buses. We can mention people that operate on the scholar transport, people that transporting students in different universities. Those are bus operators, people that transporting also commuters and having subsidized companies, the buses. They put new fleet. So we ask ourselves, what is the criteria to get operating license on the new fleet? Because while they provide new fleet, they oppress us, because in our side we have this thing of moratorium. We weren't able to grow.
Okay, and just to understand, is the moratorium still applicable? I mean, I'll tell you why I'm asking. It's because I see you then mention that there's been a process called be legal and semi-legal process, with the be legal process being done first, and then there's currently another approach which is referred to as being the semi-legal process. So the question is, when was it uplifted, and what is the difference between the two, be legal and the semi-legal processes?
During around 2004, 2005, they call it legal operators because they have operating license. And in the operation, we have a lot of vehicles during that time. They don't have operating license. So the department uplift the moratorium, and they said, now we are going to semi-legal, because we are operating, but we are not legally. So they open and give that part of a period as semi-legal. So there was a campaign that encouraged all operators that have not an operating license holder to apply an operating license. And they open just a short of time and they close it also.
And was it opened because those, just to clarify so that it is very clear to the panel, those who were not legal, they were not legal because of the moratorium? Would that be a correct? So they couldn't apply for operating licenses because there was a moratorium? Just to clarify for the panel if that was the case.
It's true. Because of the moratorium, they weren't able to make an application, but they have vehicles that are in operation.
Okay. And I understand that Santaco National has now taken a position that as part of dealing with, after the Congress which was held recently, that in trying to address some of the issues that we see in various provinces on oversaturation of routes and all of those things, a decision has been taken not to recruit new members into the association. Would that also be the position also here?
Yeah, as Mpumalanga Santaco, around 2016, we take a resolution, we develop a policy document, and that policy document we give also the PRI and the Department of Public Works, Road and Transport to say we are oversaturated. They must stop to register new members. But to our surprise, we saw the department still do registering new members. In the document, we are very specific because there are part of replacement. If the elder people pass away, the mother must take over or the son must take over. That part is accommodated in the policy document. Specific to the new people that come in the industry, because we are oversaturated. That's why we decide to develop that policy document to control the oversaturated in the taxi industry.
Thank you. And just on the question of transformation, you mentioned that one of the one of the issues that is prohibiting growth of the industry is is that government is not addressing some of the frustrations that the industry has. I just wanted to first clarify what those frustrations are and whether they've been informed and whether government has been informed of these frustrations and what government's response has been to the frustrations.
First frustration, when we inquire with the government in terms of subsidy, they told us now there are no more subsidized buses. They subsidize individual commuters. Our question as taxi operators, we transport the very same commuters, but we are not getting a subsidy. That thing, it frustrates us, because if I transport, like for an example, you working in the same company, this other brother using a bus, this other brother using a taxi, it's the very same people that have a subsidy. I'm transporting you because you use a taxi. This other one uses a bus, goes to the bus because the bus it have a subsidy. In terms of pricing, bus is cheaper than taxi. Taxi are very expensive because are not subsidized. So we are losing a lot of commuters because they weren't able to afford the fees of a taxi. Preferable the one that have subsidy. Our question and the frustration, why we are not getting subsidy as a taxi industry? Because we are transporting the same people. And as a result, if you can check the way bank repossess our vehicle, it's amazing. Because each and every month, they repossess not less than 20 vehicles. We have a lot of people they out in the business because we don't have any support from the government as a subsidy.
You mentioned the question of subsidy, and then you then link it in. You then link the issue to the repossession of the taxes that your members have. The question that I have is, what form of subsidy do you think would work for the industry? Are you saying government should subsidize the commuter, or are you saying that in addition to the commuter being subsidized, there has to be another form of subsidy, that is geared at assisting operators as well?
Yeah, because we ask the department, what is the criteria to qualify for the subsidy? They reply that passenger, they get subsidized. It's what the government told us. So we want to know from the government what we're supposed to do as a taxi industry to qualify the subsidy. Because we are transporting the very same people. We don't get clear answer from the department. Remember the current fleet that we have, it's a new fleet. One, it's very expensive fleet. It's too difficult to service the installment of the vehicle that we are operating with currently. That lead the repossession of vehicle, the number being increased.
And would you be happy as well to see a form of subsidy that subsidizes the passenger, the commuter?
Yes. If we can, get the same treatment as buses, because we understand now, passenger, they have subsidy. Why they weren't supposed to give us such privilege?
And as part of the issues you deal with when you deal with the question of transformation is the question of the BRT. Maybe just to try firstly to understand, I understand that Mbombela is one of the secondary cities that have been identified for the implementation of the BRT in South Africa. The question that I'm more interested in is firstly to try and understand if any of your members are part of, if there are any current negotiations taking place in order to deal with, in order to try and implement, this new BRT system.
Yes, we are part of the committee. As I speak, I'm the chairperson of the steering committee of Mbombela Integrated Public Transport Network. But when we negotiate with the municipality, this project, it's a package. It's not like they must take us to focus only on the operation only. We talk about the issue of value chain, whereby we must venture as taxi operators. We are affected as taxi operators in terms of implementing the new system. So we want to participate in the value chain as a whole. You can name management of the bus facility. There's a lot of value chain within the jurisdiction of the project. So we want to take part. And also, we have a question to the municipality, because what we require from them, they must give us the specification, because this is the specification of the vehicle that we need in this project. We as taxi industry, we can able to procure the vehicle that the municipality required. But it seems as if the municipality, we in disagreement about that, because they want to design, they told us they want to use the same fleet that we have currently. So our discussion are not productive discussion, because the municipality need us to follow their way while we have our own presentation as a taxi operators. We see that thing we can able to work for us. But the municipality, they have something that work for the municipality as they propose the operation.
Maybe before we get to the specifics, and Mr. Lisufi, my colleague, will ask you more questions on the BRT. I'm more interested in the current operating licenses that your members have. What sort of discussions are you currently having with the municipalities in terms of where, the current operating licenses that your members currently have? We understand in other provinces that operators are being asked to, to give or to surrender those operating licenses for them in order to enable them to participate in this system. What is the current process currently in Mpumalanga?
As Santaco Mpumalanga, I would take a stand that all our operators must not surrender their operating license to this project, because the license, it gives us a permission to operate our business. Why we surrender our license to operate our business? If the municipality, they want to empower us as operators, they must empower us while we have our license. It's not a question of getting in the project that the municipality think it's better for the municipality. We are looking the benefit of the operators. If you have a bottle store license and the mall come to open a bottle store next to you, you must surrender your bottle store operating license to the mall. It's not. Why the government want us to surrender our operating license? Remember, the BRT thing, they give us only a period of 12 years. What happened after 12 years? because we're still living after 12 years. So if we surrender our license after 12 years, we must pack in our bag, check whether we go to sell fruits, tomato and vegetables. So we are not interested to sell tomato and bananas, because we open taxi operation business because we are interested to transporting people. So we can't surrender our operating license. It's what our position as Mpumalanga Santaco is currently.
And not to put words into government, into the municipality's mouth, because I don't hear you saying it. But what the municipality is actually asking is asking the operators to surrender their operating licenses. Would that be a correct summary of what is being put on the table by the municipality to the operators?
We are saying it's totally wrong. We won't surrender our operating license. If they don't want to empower us, they must keep their empowerment system aside. We continue suffer as we are suffer.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Lesofo.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I think you've already canvassed some of the issues with my colleague. This will just be a few follow-up questions, and perhaps we can start with the BRT. If you could just explain to us how far is the implementation process? How far is the process in terms of implementation?
Currently, they are busy with infrastructure, and also they are busy with engagement with the industry.
Okay.
As I've indicated that we disagree, we agree in other issues.
Okay. And have they identified routes that are likely to be affected?
Yes.
Could you perhaps, are you in a position to mention some of those routes?
Yes. It's R40. They say phase 1, it's from here, Nelspruit to Hazyview. Phase 2, they join also Barberton, must be part of the corridor. And phase 3A, they've mentioned Ganyamazane and Lihau. Phase 4, Gapogweni. Phase 5, it's Matsulu.
Okay. And you mentioned that in your negotiations, there are issues where your members and government are able to find common ground, but there are issues where you don't seem to agree. And I think you've mentioned some of the issues. Are you able to just separate the two? Maybe you can start with the issues where you are able to find each other with government, and the issues where you are unable to find each other, and perhaps what could be the problem?
One, we agree with the government to develop routes and allocate a line of a public transport, because they can able to, we as transporters, we can able to manage time for commuters. But it seems as if they've turned around to say they want to implement the mixed fleet operation. I mean, we must mix with the public users on the road. Like other cities, we have a delegated line as transporters. So if they can able to allocate us a line as transporters, we are very happy about that one. That we are not happy about it. I've mentioned the issue of surrendering the operating license. That one we are not happy at all. 2, the issue of survey. You remember they told us about market share. We must do survey. Our question as an industry, how can we survey market share with someone very empowered, someone very rich, while you are poor, but you talk about market share? How can you analyze the share if you as government, you provide X millions of rand, but B, you are not providing any cent, and you speak about market share? We as an industry, we see not fair, there is no fairness there, because you can't talk about market share with Tsipi, Patrice Motsipi, as we know it's very rich, and we said you must share equally with Patrice. It's one way, it's one work.
And my next question is probably linked to that, because I also wanted to understand if, as part of your negotiations, there have been discussions about the compensation and the model that will be used for that purpose. Has government discussed with you its compensation model or framework? And if that is the case, what is your reaction to that?
Currently, they never discuss with us in terms of compensation. Because remember, I've indicated that municipality want us to use the current fleet that we have.
Okay.
Although we disagree with the municipality, because the clause of after 12 years, we must go to tender. So what was, after 12 years, the requirement of the fleet that be required after the 12 years? If they say we're supposed to use the current fleet that we have, it's also designed to disadvantage us, because we want to grow as a taxi industry. As currently we're operating of using venture, Avanza, and minibus taxis, we want to see ourselves operating the bigger bus.
Okay. Just to confirm, in other provinces where BRT has been implemented, operators were required to organize themselves in vehicle operating companies, and they have essentially been given 12-year contracts as well. Just to confirm, is that how the system will work even in Mpumalanga?
Yes. As we preparing as a taxi industry, already we organize ourselves. We have a VOC that all operators are affected, are belonging in that VOC.
Oh, so the VOC has already been established?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the concerns that has been raised by operators, especially in the Western Cape, is that government appears to be heavily involved in the management and running of the VOCs. Some of the operators actually see government as running the VOCs itself, instead of VOCs being run by operators. I know you are still in the initial phase. I just want to get a sense in terms of your experience in Mpumalanga. Are you in charge of your VOC, or government is also playing a role?
Yeah, lucky enough, because we do benchmarking as operators around Mpumalanga. We go to other provinces to benchmark what happened there. And we get a lot of lessons, negative and good part of the project. One is that officially they want to manage the VOC. So we have a question, as business people, you can't manage my business. Why government, you are so interested to manage our business? We disagree in that regard. That's why we develop our own VOC, whereby all associations are affected. A board of directors are from those associations, and beneficiaries are members of the associations. No official leading this VOC.
And you also mentioned one a critical component of running the VOC, that is participation in the value chain. One of the issues, or another issue that has been raised as a concern by VOCs in other provinces is that they are actually denied the opportunity to participate in the value chain. And I understand from your evidence that you have already flagged this issue with government, that you want to participate, you want to be empowered, in that regard. What has been government's attitude to your request?
I can say currently we saw negative attitude because we not agree with this. We agree in some other issues, but when comes on a value chain per se, because as I've mentioned that we do benchmarking. We've been in Western Cape, whereby station security, diesel, managed by the private company out of the taxi operators. So our question, if we can bargain our numbers, we can able to negotiate a cheaper diesel. So that's why we need to take part on the value chain. We need to secure the bus shelters, the depot, using our own people as a taxi industry. For an example, if there's a cleaning of a station, why you bring a private company to clean our station? Because we have people that can able to do that. Remember, there's a loss of job. If they introduce, we have a lot of drivers, they lose work. So where we must allocate those drivers. That's why we emphasize we need the value chain. If we have the value chain, we can able to locate the drivers in a different value chain projects.
Thank you. If we could, I just have one or two questions on in relation to subsidy buses. And I just want to understand the nature of competition. To what extent do you compete with subsidized buses? Could you perhaps mention some of the key routes where you compete with subsidized buses, commuter subsidized buses?
You see, that question, it makes me cry, really, because it's not like we are, it's not a competition per se. I don't know how can I put it, because the way they design their operation, they make sure to eliminate all taxi operators. Because if we have a location, a new location, there's no route there. We go as a taxi industry to transport passengers. When the municipality advertise on the tender, say, we want to develop a bus route, they never say a taxi route. The municipality used to say a bus route. They put paving or tie road. The bus come in. Our question, all along the route was so bad, was transporting the people as taxi industry. When the route is good, the surface is good, the bus come in with a cheaper price. Take the very commuters that we used to transport. We're supposed to take all that vehicle was operating in that road, where that vehicle must go. The bank must take it, those vehicles. So that's why I'm saying they designed to destroy the taxi industry. As I don't know, because we've met even the board of directors for the same company to say, guys, because you are the bigger company, what your strategy to develop the small companies, the taxi industry. It comes to our attention as a taxi industry. There's no strategy of empowering the small company. Only they have a strategy to destroy and eliminate the taxi operators here.
And which routes would you say are the most affected routes?
One, it's Kanyamazane, Matsulu, Kapogweni. Currently, the new route that I've mentioned, it's Msholozi and Matafeni. And also, Mkutlu has a view. Because the companies operate actually the whole entire Ehlanzeni.
And these are the routes where some of your members have had to return their minibus taxis to the banks.
Yes.
Because of their inability to compete effectively with the subsidy bus operations.
It's true.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Lesofe. Panel members?
Okay. No, thank you. I just have a few follow-up questions. So you mentioned that you are hesitant to surrender your operating licenses in the implementation of BRT. And you also say in your evidence that the municipality provides a letter of recommendation to the PRI. I just want to understand how, if the municipality is driving the BRT and they decide at some stage not to recommend that an operating license be approved by the PRI, how are you going to deal with that situation?
Because there's time that the municipality, they don't want to do recommendations. You know, we don't have other alternative to do except the one that make us to liberate the country. It's the only way that we must follow.
I'm not sure if I follow, but I think I'll just proceed with my next question. I think the issue that you mentioned is the repossessions, because of encroachment of buses in some of your routes. Amongst your members, which financial institution, as far as you know, finances most of the taxis in Mpumalanga?
As a taxi industry, we have our own institution that finance taxi operators. Because before, each and every bank, when we come as a taxi operator, they don't want to finance you. One, they say you are high risk. So we take a resolution as Santaco to develop our own financial institution known as SA Taxi Finance. So SA Taxi Finance, it helps all taxi operators. So even before they do repossession of vehicle, they start on negotiation with us, whereby we find ourselves as we are no more making money in that road. Other members, they surrender the vehicle to SA. Because the situation, it forced them to surrender the vehicle. So others, they repossess because he tried to work around and borrow money to, pay the installment, but it won't work. They end up repossess the vehicle.
Just to be clear, our understanding is that Santaco have SA is taxi choice. And you are mentioning SA Taxi Finance. So you have a relationship with... maybe you can explain.
Taxi Choice it's our business wing as Santaco, whereby our idea and the vision of Santaco, when we create taxi choice, we want to order vehicle direct from the manufacturer to supply our members with cheaper price. Because remember, when the dealership had that, there's a scrapping allowance, they escalate prices. So that's where we come with the initiative to develop taxi choice. Our intention to order a vehicle direct to the manufacturer and do the distribution to our members.
So in other words, SA Taxi Finance, as far as you understand, is the major financier of minibus taxis in this region?
Not in this region, in the country.
In the country?
Yes.
Okay. Just for maybe to assist in the inquiry, what would you say would be the average interest rates charged, amongst the different tax associations? We understand that a risk profile is different, but as far as you know, what is the average kind of interest rate charged to some of your members?
I won't be specific because it's differ.
Yeah.
It's differ. Others, what they call it, premium, what they call it, the money that put when you buy the vehicle.
A deposit.
No, not per se deposit. It's just because I forgot. They give you 19, others 21%. Mm-hmm. They call it interest rate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 21, others 25. When we check with other banks, the interest rate that give us, it's not the one that we can able to manage. Because the interest rate determines the installment of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. We end up the vehicle very expensive.
Okay. Okay, no, thank you, Chair.
Ms. Nontomban.
Okay, the first question I have is in relation to the BRT. And the question I have is whether there has been any consultations regarding the routes that have been chosen for the BRT. And I'm asking this question because one of the things we were told in the Western Cape was that there's a specific route, for example, where it doesn't make sense to have the BRT introduced. And I wanted to find out whether that would apply in the routes and in the phases that have been identified here.
Before there was no consultation. If I can give you a picture, as a taxi operators, we start see huge development, construction. The municipality was busy building PT Hub. We used to head on news, good, there is this project coming in Bombela. But as operators that are affected, they never consulted us before. Until we stood up as operators, because they came to our taxi rank and do a huge development there. We say, as operators, you can't develop the rank without our involvement as operators. We want to know what's happening here. That's where the municipality tried to listen us. When we approach the municipality, we realize that they hire even the legal firm for taxi operators. That guy say he represent us without us. So we disagree with him. We say you won't represent us because we don't know you. We have our own legal team as taxi industry. If you want to continue with the municipality, continue, but if this project is designed for taxi operators, the municipality must listen to us. That's where we start to form a steering committee of the project. But we follow already the construction part of it was so busy constructing. I think by that time, it was almost on 40% construction.
And then the other question I had is that you mentioned that one of the things that you would like to see is to have dedicated lines shared with the taxi industry, right?
It's true.
Yeah. So the question I had was whether there are any other facilities that have been constructed for the BRT which can be shared with the taxi industry.
I'm not for sure because what we see bus terminal, bus shelters. And instead of sea route, whereby we saw like Pinari, the route that we have before, it reduced. And they've put a big cap. Before we use as taxi operators to get out of the route when we load or we pick up a passenger. But now it's difficult for us to get out of the route because they put a big cap there. So we weren't able to go out.
But in terms of, for example, the bus shelters, are those also available for use by the taxi industry?
I don't think so, because when the bus find you standing in the bus shelter, they hoot. You must move there.
And I want to take you back to what you said regarding licensing. And the question I have is whether there are instances where licenses have not been renewed for whatever reason.
No, currently we never experience such. If the license is expired, we'll follow the process and they renew. Yes.
And then the other issue you raised was the different treatment that you see in terms of how bus. Okay. So you've said that you've also experienced different treatment between taxi operators and bus operators. And you mentioned, I think, examples in relation to the licensing. I don't know if there are any other examples that you want to cite in terms of how you are treated. Oh, the other example you mentioned was in relation to subsidies. Is there anything else that you could mention in relation to how buses and taxis are treated differently? Or in fact, any other operators in the industry, whether there is any experiences of there being different treatment?
Except the operating license, the way we apply operating license. As I've indicated that we, as taxi operators, when we make an application, they require a recommendation from the municipality. But on the bus side, I don't think, because we've asked also the municipality, the buses, they follow the same criteria as we are following as taxi operators.
Okay, and then the last question I had was on the taxi recap program. In other provinces, one of the issues that has been raised is that the taxi recap program, if it were to work, it would have to be on an ongoing basis because it has to go with the renewal of the fleet, because after a while you have to get another vehicle. So are there any specific views regarding the taxi recap program here, different to what we've heard? Is there any discussion going on with the government in relation to the taxi recap program?
Yeah, on that, I can indicate something. You remember when they introduced the vehicle of the recap, they give us Inyati, Ipubezi, and other vehicles. Those vehicles, they came in South Africa, already they are scrapped. They are scrapped. So, in terms of continuing to recap the vehicle, they must recap the scrap that gave us. Because the minister, the old man, it's Maharaj, if I'm not mistaken, they make a deal with the Indian guys. I'm not trying to be, but I'm putting what happened. Because Inyat is from India. When they arrive in South Africa, you've bought a new vehicle, but you won't reach home. is stuck along the route because it's the scrap.
Thank you, Ms. Nontomban. Just two issues from my side, Mr. Gama and Mr. Kosa, before we release you. The first one relates to the BRT model in this province. I understood you to be saying that in terms of the current thinking as well as negotiations, the municipality is looking at using your current fleet. If you could explain what that means. Does it mean that the municipality is looking at a BRT model which, in terms of which the routes that have been, the BRT routes, will be serviced by the minibus taxi industry as well as BRT buses? Is that what the current model entails?
Yeah, because in that regard, the municipality, they come up with their own presentation. Firstly, they told us that they want to introduce a mixed fleet operation, of which buses and taxis must be mixed. So we asked the municipality, because we are using venture and avanzas. So what's happened about avanzas and ventures must form part of the mixed fleet. And also the issue of the age of the vehicle, because if you say we must use the mixed fleet, you are saying as municipality we must use also the CI and also the ventures. So we disagree with you, municipality, because what we understand as taxi operators, we see an opportunity to grow. We see an opportunity to venture in a bigger picture as a taxi industry. We want to take part as bus operators also as a taxi industry, because we see monopoly as a taxi operators in the bus sector. When I was 8 years, I using the very same company to go to school. Now I'm 43 years old. The very same company is still on the operation. So when we discuss with the municipality, we've indicated that we want to grow as taxi operators. We want to give them a competition, a fair competition. Because if we can have our own fleet as buses, as taxi operators, we can able to compete with the bus company. It's what we've presented to the municipality. It seems as if we're not in agreement in that regard, but our points still stand.
Just to clarify, before I go to the next question, you say that your members also operate.
I need to just take...
Maybe before, Chair, can I clarify the ventures and advisors? You remember, we normally call it 4+1, those vehicles. There's other locations that we provide such transport whereby it's far to the tar road. We use this smaller vehicle to accommodate those communities. And also in town, the issue of meter taxis, it's belong to the taxi associations. We don't want to see something like Uber come an app in Mpumalanga and take over our business. That's why we provide such service.
I actually wanted you to also clarify what your understanding is of affected operators here in terms of the BRT, because our understanding is that there may be a different view regarding who the affected operator is, and this is specifically relevant when it comes to the compensation model that would apply when the BRT is introduced.
Our understanding, if you are affected, if they introduce the new system on the route that you operate current, you are affected. Yes.
Yeah, my second question, which is the last one from me, relates to the issue of duplication of routes between different associations, which you indicated is one of the major sources of conflict and tension. What I would like to find out is, in terms of the practice of the PRI in this province, what is the exact role of taxi associations in the process of making applications for operating licenses? Is there any specific role that taxi associations play in this province in the processing of applications for operating licenses?
Yes, there is a role. One association must issue a recommendation letter to recommend this is a member in good standing. Because what we are trying as association, we want disciplined members. If you are not disciplined, we don't need you in the industry. If we used to fight in the industry, we don't need you anymore. That is the role played by the industry and by the association. And also, if the member used to do conflict with other association, we weren't able to recommend you, because once we recommend you, you go this other side and cause a problem. So we are trying to manage all members. Each and every association, they have a responsibility to manage their members and also manage the commuters around that association.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Gama and Mr. Kosa, for your time and for your presentation as well. We will certainly take up the issues that you have raised with the relevant stakeholders, including the PRI, as well as the Mbombela municipality. Thank you very much.
Yeah, before we leave, Chair, I never heard you asking us about the operating license, the issue of radius, and as the current, we using the road-based operating license, but the other part using the radius. Before we using the radius, but with the new act, we go back using the road-based operating license.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you. We will now take a short 5-minute break, and we will be back at 12:15 to take a presentation from Santaco Tshwane. It seems as if they've crossed the border to Mpumalanga. We'll take a very short break. There is tea just next to the front entrance. Welcome back. Before we took the adjournment, I should have said we'll be back at 11:15, not 12:15. We will now receive a submission from Santako Tshwane. Thank you very much for coming and welcome to the inquiry. There should be a piece of paper in front of you. You may take the oath or the affirmation.
Thank you very much. I, Abnatsebe, swear that evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsebe. You can hand over the piece of paper to your colleague. Sir, if you could also do likewise, you may take the oath or the affirmation. And please switch on the mic as you do so.
I, Jabu Mahlangu, swear that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahlangu.
I, Marianne Tuli, swear that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ntuli. Perhaps we could start with Mr. Mahlangu. If you could just start by very briefly explaining what your role is in Tshwane Santako, as well as if you could also briefly explain how long have you held that role.
I, Jabu Mahlangu, I'm a chairperson of PMP Taxi Association. I've been the chairperson since 2000. Now I'm serving under Santako Tshwane Regional Taxi Council as the General Secretary of the region, being elected on our last election last year in August. I'm now 8 months into this position. My role is for me to be the engine of the organization, and I understand the transport sector that I am in. Okay. I understand the transport sector since I've been an operator.
I'm the chairperson of the association called Pretoria Randburg Soshanguve Taxi Association. I think this is my third term as the chairperson. I'm re-elected again as the chairperson of the association, and I was also the chairperson of the Santako Greater Tshwane Taxi Council for the past term. Then I was re-elected again to serve for this term. Now I'm 8 months with my colleague here, Tata Mahlangu and Mantul. We are newly elected. And I'm also serving in the Gauteng province as a deputy secretary, and I'm also serving into the national structure, Santako, as the deputy Secretary General.
Ms. Ntuli.
Okay. I'm a secretary of Johannesburg Pretoria Mabopane Taxi Association for the past 2 terms. And I'm also a deputy chairperson of Women Desk for the first term. And I'm also a deputy secretary of Tshwane Regional Taxi Council for the 3rd term now. And I've been newly elected just only for 8 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ntuli. You have made a submission to the inquiry. You now have an opportunity to take us through the key issues raised in your submission.
Thank you very much. I think I will start with the background. The taxi industry was before the year 2000 not sufficiently or regulated at all. And in 2000, the democratic government intervened and passed into law the National Land Transport Act, Transition Act of 22 of 2000. That's the NLTTA, which has been repealed by the National Transport Act 99 of 2009. These legislations were an intervention mechanisms to take forward the transport policy, which seeks to transform the public transport industry, in particular the taxi industry. The government recognized the fact that the taxi industry is the only black-owned business industry in the country and move over 60% of the country's public transport users on a daily basis. And the taxi industry is truly the heartbeat of the country's economy, and hence the regulatory framework intended to take its existence and sustainability to greater level. The intention of the legislature is clearly articulated and provided for in the preamble and Section 2 of the NLTA, which provides for, 1, for the furtherance of the restructuring and transformation of the land transport initiated by the NLTTA. 2, giving effect to national policy. And 3, prescribing national principles, guidelines, requirements, frameworks, national norms and standards that must be applied uniformly in the provinces and matters provided for in Section 146(2) of the Constitution. And 4, consolidating land transport functions and locating them in the appropriate sphere of government. And it is therefore against the above this background that the land transport restructuring and transformation should be assessed for the progress made since 2000 to date, and how we could move forward from such an assessment. And it is also important to note that due to the fragmentation of the taxi operator structures, a decision was taken to establish Santaco as a legitimate taxi structure that represents the broader taxi operators in South Africa. And my 2 will be the licensing, route allocation, and entry requirements. The function relating to the licensing, route allocation, and entry requirements rest with the provincial regulatory entities and the National Public Transport Regulator, established in terms of Section 23 of NLTA and given powers by Section 24, while the NPTR in terms of Section 46 to 49. The functions stated above in paragraph 2.1 must be performed having regard to Chapter 6 of the NLTA, which compels the licensing authorities to consider. This includes development of integrated public transport plans, funding strategy or policy or economic viability of routes to ensure sustainability, under or overbearing of routes, and thereafter monitoring and evaluation. Therefore, the national, provincial, and local government are compelled in terms of the NLTA to do certain things as applicable in various jurisdictions in the furtherance of the public transport services, and regard must be had to these provisions of the NLTA when dealing with the regulation of the taxi industry. To date, the government is dismally failing to comply with the Chapter 6. As a result, the majority of public transport users are without operating licenses or permit. And this has become a challenge, and we feel that is very unfair to the taxi industry. Municipalities are contributors as they have failed to develop integrated transport plans, which the PRE and the NPTR must consider when assessing the applicant's applications. And for your information, I'm serving also as the chairperson of the BRTs, And to your surprise, BRT is a new model that has come to South Africa, but for that buses to get license, it's very easy. I'm talking from experience. Very easy to apply for an operating license for BRT buses, because that, remember, is an agreement between the taxi industry, the city, and obviously I won't count the province for now, because this is the prerogative that are given to the municipalities. Now the question is, what is the problem for the taxi industry to benefit same, even if we know that, be it integrated as it comes in a form of empowering the taxi operators, but what makes it difficult not to consider the taxi operators in terms of the operating licenses and the challenges that they are facing? And for this, though the Act requires provinces alternatively, the Department of Transport to take over the functions where the municipality or province, as the case may be, failed to comply with Chapter 6, and such has not happened. Where applications approved for operating license or permit, such is done on the basis of reports developed by PRE officials who have no capacity or skills in transport, economics, and planning, thus leading to conflicts. And this has been our argument. What makes the taxi industry to fight? Do you think taxi operators, they've got enough that they can supply in terms of making sure that the so-called conflict or taxi wars, they can fund taxi wars? Obviously, to our understanding as leaders is that this thing is a third force that is doing, it's a sort of a monopoly that causes the taxi industry to fight, because they are even unable to pay for their quantums at the banking institutions, so they are blacklisted. Now, how can a blacklisted man or woman, a businessman or woman, be able to fund a war whilst he's unable to fund the infrastructure that he was given by the banks or either by government? So it becomes very difficult, and we are saying some of the routes in the operating license, you would wonder the providing routes that are operated either by 2-3 associations without consultation, and that on its own creates a serious problem for the taxi industry. Hence, we see conflicts coming and going. And we have a situation of oversupply, saturation, and non-viable routes leading to conflicts, and also increased non-economical competition. Because you can simply, I think this one has come so many times, I can't overemphasize it. In the NLTA, the National Transport Policy were implemented where fully the taxi services and operators would be in a better position than it is at the moment, as we see a deteriorating services since the development of the policy and the promulgation of the NLTA. And to us, this is a rationalization in action, because to us, it looks like we must die a natural death. No one wants to be responsible for the taxi industry, because some of the processes that are coming our way, even if a transformation in its own, in our belief, but rationalization is playing part here, because some of our members are unable to come back into the industry after serving for quite some time in this taxi industry of us. The NLTTA seeks to regulate local taxi operations by establishing an association, and yet the NLTA de-established same but did not provide any other mechanism. Now, the allocation of routes is largely based on thumbsuck philosophy and not based on any legal process, to state the least. And we've had an argument that once the government give out a tender, you've got subcontractors. You can't give the same tender to another operator to come and do the same tender. But in our instance, we wonder, because this license that we're getting, it looks like it's just for as and when, just to get us out of the system. So the entry requirements should be based on the integrated transport plans, which at this stage do not exist except in few municipalities, especially the metros. Routes overlapping, causing conflict between associations. And you would understand that you've got new developments, you've got malls that are coming in, you've got squatter camps and different development. But transport, public transport, especially on the taxis, unless if there are buses that would have to come there, there's a process that is followed. But in our case, nothing has been done. So we are just left to see to finish, and we end up fighting one another. That's the overlapping. I can quote in our province the Mall of Africa situation between the Alexander Taxi Associations. You can quote what happened there. I cannot overemphasize. This is some of the failures that government is bringing to us, and we end up being on the losing side because you'll get a statement that there's no leadership in the taxi industry. But how can you lead something that someone is influencing the violence? Because being a leader, you cannot always deal with the violent situation. And this violence, it looks like it benefits some of the government officials. Sorry to say that. Associations allocate routes themselves in the vicinity of the area in which they are operating and are custodians instead of obtaining proper licensing for operating on those routes. Most of us, you'll find all developed areas, we don't have permits to operate those malls. There's not even ranks, but I would come to that one later. The placement moratorium by government on the issuance of licenses and permits, which is imposed, affected the operators negatively, not only in Gauteng, but the whole country, I think. It ensures that taxi operators are victims of the law enforcement. When an operational license or a permit expires, it is automatically removed from the system, which is not fair. Licenses used to be indefinite, and that system worked for minibus taxi operators. Nowadays, if a license is not used for 6 months, it is withdrawn. As per Section 78, there is supposed to be an inquiry as to why it has not been in use, but that is not done. License is just withdrawn without warning, which violates the rules relating to natural justice and is arbitrary. Reapplication is made impossible after the license has expired, which is a problem because these licenses are an asset to operators and sometimes an inheritance to their families. Should the operator of a minibus taxi pass on, this license becomes a legacy platform for our families to continue with the business. The application process requires an individual to go to the association and present their IDs and any other required documents, as well as a joining fee. Once the person becomes a member, they then receive a recommendation letter from the association to apply for a permit. The taxi industry still organizes themselves in taxi associations, and membership of new members is guided and regulated, and the code of conduct of all members in accordance with the association's constitution. And remember that since government took a decision to come up with this structure, Santaco, which is our structure, the constitution that governs the taxi industry is the Santaco constitution to all the affiliates. It's like your national government, your provincial. You don't have a provincial constitution. You've got only one constitution that governs South Africa. So it's the same to Santaco. We have a Santaco constitution that governs all associations. And associations are running on the bylaws. They've got their policies and they've got their bylaws. That's the process that we are busy trying to take over to our members to understand that the only constitution that rules the taxi industry is the Santaco constitution to all structures, including the region and the provincial structures of Santaco, and going down to associations for that matter. And Santaco has decided not to take any more members in order to control saturation of the industry. And we understand that, be it as it may, some of the associations are still taking new members. When you ask, sometimes it's because of the demand and supply. So you end up having those associations that are still considering new members in the areas that they are operating. It's not because because it's a demand that they will come across, because already they've got routes that they are operating. But at some 10 points, they will have to look for new members within the areas of their operations into the communities to empower the members who are living in those areas. But a Santaco decision was taken that for us to come to a control, we need not to take any more members. This decision was also taken in order to maintain growth for the existing members. This is very important. If you go to number of route calculations in our operations now, members are unable to take home, let me say per month, 15,000. You'll find only few routes, and a quantum now, a repayment is at 16,000. So you can imagine that that person does not have a business for 4 or 6 years that he must pay over that car. That is a challenge that we are still facing. And SANTACO, through this decision, will help families and employees of minibus taxi operators to be able to grow within the industry by virtue of inheritance. That is why sometimes you wonder why unions are not coming to us, because we've got union members who are taxi operators. They know exactly what the challenge is. You cannot unionize the taxi industry drivers because it's a norm. Making 14,000 instead of paying for 16,000, how much are you going to pay the driver? So our outcry is not only about us as operators, we are also looking at the employees, for that matter, to say they need better the environment. We need to create a conducive climate for them as well as we go forward. But really we depend on government. Sometimes it becomes a really embarrassment to us. The industry remains unsubsidized, that's where I'm coming to. And only a few bus operators, and I want to overemphasize, few bus operators and white operators, my apology for racism, I'm not racist, I'm just bringing the points forward. White operators are subsidized, which makes competition unhealthy and threatens the very existence of the industry despite the obligation created by the NLTA. Now, I will come to the price setting mechanism. Fair pricing, I think now you've noticed that the fuel has gone up almost thrice now in the recent month, and we are guided by the market. The price increases are as and when. For us to increase is as and when. Now, because the first increment we've raised first, now what should happen now? Because the fuel has gone up again. It's another challenge. The simple reason for us, when you compare the subsidized bus systems, they only do the increment once a year. It's a policy. But for us, you can't. It must be as and when. Because a customer is not subsidized. It's not like when we say it, we understand very clear that we don't say subsidize us as operators. We say subsidize the commuter so that we are able to make the living out of this business. Because really, we are not making it. Even if now we've done the price index is giving us a challenge. You don't even understand how to do it because we are not subsidized. And that is, we are doing it on and as and when. And because we are the CBOs, we cannot increase without consulting SANCO or various unions. So for us to be able to increase, we need to go to community structures. Revision is based on inflation, but the mini-bus taxi industry always tries to keep their prices below inflation. Unfair competition due to the fact that the bus and the rail sector are subsidized, which is why the taxi industry is struggling since the democratic government took over. And the same taxi industry has no uniform policy on price setting mechanisms, save for doing so based on the prevailing circumstances. For instance, now we've got a 15% VAT increase, inflation and cost of living standards going up, and now we have a serious challenge. And we are not saying, you know, sometimes when you consider these things, you can imagine how much VAT is paid by the taxi operators when they are buying these vehicles. It's not that we are looking for something which is not there. We are saying it because we know that we are paying 15% VAT now. And this VAT goes to government. But we are not subsidized for that matter. And it brings a serious challenge to us. And on the transformation program, as stated in paragraph 1 and 2 herein, above the transformation strategy, the taxi industry propagated a move for self-regulation to being regulated by policy and the law. And clearly, and it's apparent that the failure of government to implement the transformation agenda in terms of the transport policy and the NLTA has worsened the economic standing of the transport operators and clearly the collapse of the industry. I've mentioned that this is rationalization in action. The operators could benefit from public transport infrastructure development if the government could properly consult on infrastructure development and town planning and focusing on the BEE empowerment. And this one is 100. You don't have to look for something. Without even having that paper, you can see it. It's black-owned, 100% so, by black women, men and women in business. But we are just doing it for someone else. There's no profit. For you to be successful in the taxi industry, it takes milestone And you can just imagine leaders who were leading from SAPTA, yes, up to now, who's successful. You don't even have one person that you might say he's a minister from the taxi industry or he's a chief of police from the taxi industry. We don't have such. Things are done for us without us. And that is a clear confusion that we end up not knowing what to do or who to cry to. The operators could benefit from public, my apology, 4.4. There is no financial support of any form from government, yet other modes such as buses, trains, SAA, for example, receives huge financial and technical support. Government conflicting itself by granting other modes of transport support, but not minibus taxi industry. And let us put on record that other provinces, at least they are better. Mpumalanga, KZN, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, they are getting that little grant from government to run on their structures. How do we are getting nothing? There's nothing for, we are running on our pockets. And you know, our pockets have run dry. To run this structure, that brought me here, I'm using my money. From the same taxi that I'm not making profit from. I've used that money to come here and going back to Pretoria. And so operating locally in Gauteng itself, there's no funding from either provincial government and the cities. Okay, the cities, they've got the BRTs, which is a model that obviously the affected operators will benefit from in terms of the value chain and ownership. The BRT in Swan is owned by the affected operators, affected by BRT. But to the rest of us, we have to fund our own structures, get offices and pay for the offices, pay for the staff that must. So we are doing it on our own. And we've complained, we've went to Santiago for assistance. You go to KZN, they are getting, I'm not sure if I'm right, maybe 15 million per annum to run the structures of the taxi industry. And it's not like it's a favor. You know, something that must be done to us is like someone wants to do a favor. It's not a favor. This must be done because we are ferrying the public of South Africa and for Gauteng and other provinces for that matter. So this gives us a very serious problem in terms of financial support. But SAA now received, I think, I don't know if it's not for the second, maybe for the third. It gets an assistance from government. It will never fall on deaf ears if SAA is in trouble. But the taxi industry, we are always in trouble. We are even in trouble now as we speak to you here. But now, financial support is the problem. Being unsubsidized as we are still having serious problems, and I don't know if this thing can be addressed at all levels so that Gauteng can also be funded in terms of the structures. That the mistakes of the past must be buried and so that we can go on because life goes on. There is no or limited taxi infrastructure which is only limited to taxi ranks, road dedicated lanes, lay-bys, and proper inclusion for public events. You go to Cape Town, you've got a dedicated lane. You go to Durban, there's a dedicated lane. Maybe this is for tourists, not for South Africa. You come to Tshwane, nothing. Johannesburg, I'm not sure for Mbombela because I'm not a resident. Maybe in Mbombela there's something here in terms of the public transport infrastructure that, for example, a dedicated lane. BRTs, they come now, they've got dedicated lanes, even if it benefits us. But now the question is, why not consider the taxi industry and give us dedicated lanes to run for public use? We need to run our passengers in a rapid way. That's why then the accident issue, you cannot be able to monitor it because we are just mixed in this going up and down, and there's a serious challenge in that regard. So there is no proper government support and protection of the minibus taxis, and I've said that. Value chain ownership is compromised. Some of my colleagues were saying it. The Inyati was decided, and now those Inyatis are giving our members problems. You cannot scrap them. If you want to scrap it, an operating license becomes an issue. And now to get an operating license to scrap that car is a challenge. So because it takes if you say, we are not in a perfect world, but you can imagine an operator, some of these vehicles, you can look at it as a lead and ask yourself, is this car belonging to a member in the taxi association? Do you think all members would want to drive these Inyatis? I don't think so. All of us would want these Quantums, new ones. But you've got routes that are not sustainable, that cannot pay for a quantum. So they end up going for this inyatis and so on. But this is another challenge in terms of our... And the value chain, the tires, we are always consumers. We don't own even a single value chain, let me say, a fuel. I've got my members in Soshanguve, they've got the depot, petrol depot. But they are getting challenges. One day you get a letter, you don't have a license. And we had the one that we benchmark in Soweto, which I don't know up to so far what is happening, but there were challenges. So we need support from government in terms of this value chain, because on our own we can't do it because there's a monopoly, obviously. If you want to do it, it becomes a Pepsi and a Coke story. So Coke will never want Pepsi to go up. They will always monopolize the system so that they don't grow. So, colleagues, again, on the government failure to recognize minibus taxi industry as a leading mass transporter in South African economy and failing to incentivize the industry accordingly. And we are simply saying government marginalize the taxi industry. And I think maybe someone will hear me right. It's not that it's a mistake to say this statement out because it has been long and nothing is happening. The taxi industry is not consulted or included, recognized in decision-making that affects industry or the provinces they govern. The representative structures are not recognized in decision-making process or any matter of interest or policy. Lack of support from financial houses, I think some of our guys, they've mentioned that, and government causing operators to depend on high interest rate, charging companies due to lack of creditability. Most of us, I think, if not 80% of our members are blacklisted. And the only finance house that can assist in that regard is SA Taxi Finance. And SA Taxi Finance, in terms of the interest rate, you can want to compare it, but we've gone through to SA many times and say, guys, this interest rate, they are saying, but you are a risk. So we are taking risk. So we are giving you 25%. And obviously for you to get that 16 or 10% from ABSA, they will check your credit score, which you won't qualify anyway. So for us to get reasonable credit scores, you need first to be creditable. And so that's where the challenge comes in. And now SA Taxi Finance owns the taxis in South Africa. I was saying to someone that it's better we take our envelopes on a daily basis to SA Taxi Finance because we are not making a life. And it's better if we take envelopes and say, pay us a salary. Because the owners of these vehicles, they can't even pay themselves a simple salary of 200 a week because they must pay a driver and maintain the car and pay the installment. It becomes a challenge. So for now, in terms of the financial houses, we have a serious problem. We've preached this, and the government was promising the cooperative banks. It's not coming through. I don't know what is the problem, but something must be done for this industry to survive like the farmers did in the apartheid era, and they are still doing that. They still have the monies that they are able to draft monopolies and oppress us indirectly so. And your Uber and Taxify being able to operate on routes without licenses or route allocation, because your Uber is an app. So an app is a license nowadays in South Africa. You had an app, and people like this app, you can operate the public transport, no problem, because Uber has done that. And we are not becoming unfair on this. We know it, that Uber is here, and then the debate has gone up, and we are obviously, as Santaco, taking the taxi industry, and even the meter taxis are part of us. And obviously, the Uber operations are affecting the minibus taxi operators for that matter. SARS charging operators VAT, but not allowing them to claim it back. And in terms of the VAT, the subsidy, we are saying, government, come and workshop us. We are your children. We cannot say subsidy. Maybe we don't understand what subsidy is. And what is it that is required for us to qualify for a subsidy? Workshop us. Give us lessons as to, for you to be able to get a subsidy, this is what you must do. And we will comply because we want this subsidy as yesterday. I don't see us having a problem on that. I'm coming to competition dynamics. The bus and air and rail transport are subsidized and receive all necessary support from government, as well as bailouts when it in financial crisis due to bad management and collapse of governance structures. And Tina, when this benefit must come to us, we are told taxi violence, taxi or scrapping. This is a strategy that always will take us. Now, SAA, bad governance structures, it was assisted. So now it's a question mark. Taxi infrastructures falling apart due to lack of government maintenance or lack of security. Give us these ranks, we manage. Teach us how to manage them for the legacy platform. We can't continue for another 10 years to come. And I've said to my members, this generation is then a generation that must change this industry to the better. And the condition of the taxi fleet, minibuses ages quickly due to the effect of high operating cost. That one I've said it. The price charged by the taxi industry is not sustainable due to the fact that the majority of the users are the labor force of our country, who are also heavily hit by the high cost of living standards such as VAT, food prices, and other basic life necessities. And I've said it, and I think from officials also you'll know. If you want someone to go home, he does not have money for transport, go to the rank, you'll reach your destiny. Without you having money. You can't go to Translux, Padco of this world. They will never take you because they even have a system, inspectors. A driver is not allowed to take someone without the fares to his destinations. But in the taxi industry, you always reach your destiny safe and sound without having money in your pocket. So government must realize this, that we are the poor of the poorest, and we are dealing with the poor of the poorest. So it's not like someone will say the taxi industry is better off. We are not better off. We are dealing with the poor community, and we are also poor business people. We don't have money. It's not like in any other businesses where you've got your tenders and you subsidize a lot of money, people taking billions per annum, but getting nothing from the taxi industry, which is the majority in terms of the movement of our masses. So the stiff competition and environment as created by the government results in taxi violence and violence involving other modes. And we want to walk away from this thing of violence because some, it's a benefit for them. For us to fight is good so that we don't see the power that we possess in the economy. But we are able, from the leadership point of view, that you become a good leader in the taxi industry, you don't last for 3 terms, they will kill you. And the question is, I read this Hitman for Hire book, which states that there are people that are making business out of these killings. And those people, they don't have taxis. They only give hitmen for hire. You hire hitmen to kill one another. And which I've said from the onset, this is not from the taxi industry that we are governing, because from the governance point of view, our members are struggling. So we need to change. We need a paradigm shift in terms of the government approaching these processes since the beginning of the democratic era in 1994. The assessment regarding implementation of the transformation agenda in terms of the public transport policy and the NLTA and the regulation of the taxi industry must be done with a sense of agency in order to develop a well plan of action for the development of the taxi industry. And by so saying, we are saying in conclusion, colleagues and the House, we think that taking forward our submission to government, we hope that this time around, we can't say timelines, but we'll see a change of plan in terms of empowering the taxi industry and taking us to the right direction. And we are ready for the empowerment. Hence, I've alluded in terms of the BRTs that it's a good model, but competition is very important. As much as we are in it and we are working tireless to make sure that the affected parties are going to affect it and are going to be better off, and there's no job losses, and there's value chain, and it's better off, and we, in terms of the legacy, our families are going to benefit going forward, because we want to make sure that in terms of the structures and associations and members, we are waiting for government to give us enough training to our drivers in terms of customer care. We know there are complaints from our side as well that there are certain issues that we need to take into consideration. But we are saying, in this instance, for us to be able to move we need government assistance. And to us, competition is of importance. So we are saying in conclusion, thank you very much for affording us this opportunity to come and present our case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsebe. Mr. Mahlangu, is there anything that you would like to add or emphasize?
No, sir, I think my chairperson has said it all.
Thank you, Mr. Mahlangu. Ms. Ntuli, is there anything that you would like to add to the presentation?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ngobeni?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to Mr. Tsebe, Mr. Mahlangu, and Ms. Ntuli. Maybe just to start with the question on licensing. You make a submission and there's a complaint about the question around the e-hailing services, you know, where you've dealt with Uber and Taxify. And I think there you indicate that Uber and Taxify in Pretoria, they operate on routes without licenses. The question that I have there is, since their introduction in Pretoria, has the industry received requests, you know, to make submissions either to the PRI or to the municipalities, or to comment on any of applications that have been brought by any of these e-hailing services? That is, if they've brought any applications. So the question is, has the industry and has Santaco, for an example, been approached either by the PRI or by the municipality, because the law requires that, you know, when, you know, if operators are applying for operating licenses, they are publicized and people have to raise objections and comment and all of those things. So the question is whether the industry itself has voluntarily gone to the PRI, you know, to make its issues heard, or whether you've responded to any application that has been placed, you know, before these authorities when they are considering any applications. That is, if there have been any applications that have been brought that you are aware of.
Thank you very much. And I think it's evidence that you remember that the meter taxis, they voiced it whilst they were meeting with the MEC of Gauteng, Vadi, and it was a very violent approach. But in short, the cities or the province never consulted with us, and nothing has been brought to book so far. So there was no consultation in that regard, if I might be straight to the answer.
Thank you. And just a couple of questions on the BRT, and my colleague will come in, but I'm more interested in the negotiations around. I understand the current route is the one from, I'm more interested on the Vonderboom route. And I understand that you are personally involved on that one. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's been reported that there is a drop-off agreement that has been signed by the city and the associations in respect of that route. Am I correct? If you can just leave your mic on, I think it's off.
Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to place it on record, my understanding is that there is an agreement that has been reached, a drop-off agreement between the association and the city.
Yes.
And maybe just for the purposes of the record, who are those three associations that are involved here?
It's Hammanskraal Taxi Association, Stengwater Taxi Association, and Gamukoni Hammanskraal Stengwater Taxi Association.
Thank you. And when was this implemented, this drop-off agreement?
The drop-off agreement was implemented in January, mid-January this year. 8th January.
And just briefly, what is what is required of those members in terms of this agreement?
If I would take you or give you a background, what normally happens in the BRT affected, you know, we spoke about the integrated system that the government is coming up with. And I think initially the BRT in Pretoria started in town and it went to Hatfield. And obviously in terms of the bumps on the seat, there was no ridership, and that was complained from the city. And then they come up with a strategy in terms of the line 2, is it 1A? That is the vulnerable. So they only identify associations in the north were 3 associations which I've just mentioned to you. And the process of the city is that we've got advisors, we've got the legal advisors, we've got financial advisor, we've got a technical advisor that are appointed by us but paid by the city in terms of assisting us, in terms of making sure that the value that will be taking. But sometimes, and that's what I've realized, that when you take a decision and you are too happy, you might take a wrong decision because you are too happy. And we went to Hammanskraal, they were too happy. And then after all the deliberations and negotiations, it was agreed that a car, remember this one, it was different. It's not like buying a car and say go. It's buying a certain portion of the route, but obviously becoming a shareholder. And I think into the bus operating company. And the 3 associations were consulted, I think, for almost the whole year 2017. Going to membership, calling executives. When the compensation was negotiated, the chairpersons of the 3 associations were part of that negotiation team. And it was agreed on an amount. And, you know, the city was not sure either to pay it, but it was very robust. I still remember I was the one going to association, and at some point they will even point fingers and think that you are selling them out. But I said, guys, we are together in this. We might see it as, for now, we are failing. And then the drop-off, the first round of the drop-off was, they did comply, even if it was hard. Remember, this thing is new to all of us. No one is perfect on this one. And when we went on, there was a bus strike. Now our buses are affected by these SAPEC issues, and they have to withdraw the services. Then we went on until the strike was called off. Now they must drop off again. That is a challenge. Now to drop off. And of course, coming to the contract, all members of all associations paid that compensation. They did sign an agreement with the city. So, and it's a legal binding arrangement. So, and the city now has issued letters of a breach to us. So we are calling a meeting, I think, for this week to try and rectify that situation, because it's like it's not operators, it's drivers that are demanding certain demands from their side as employees. But we are busy sitting on that, and we hope that our deliberations with the affected parties will be resolved either by, is it tomorrow? We have a follow-up meeting, and so we will then be able to say, yes, contracts were signed, that we can confirm by members, and the drop-off must happen at Vonderboom. But we have, obviously, some of my colleagues have said it, in terms of the infrastructure, our members are complaining. There's no taxi shelters, but there are bus shelters. These are some of the things that we've said to the city, and I think they are coming up on their side as well to make sure the bus scheduling, because remember, the taxi, we don't work on schedules. Sometimes you expect 5 taxis within a certain time, and on Mondays or sometimes in a week, you might find the schedule changes a little bit. So we need more buses than the schedule that the city is providing now. And this from the operators from our side is that they've brought it forward to us. Listen, mixed traffic, like from Vonderboom to Maravastad is a mixed traffic. There's nothing rapid there. Say, but I cannot drop off, and you take the same passengers, and you go to Maravastad on the mixed traffic. So that does not serve a purpose. And we are sitting and talking to the city in terms of those grievances that were brought forward by our members. And we hope that as we engage with them, we will come to an amicable solutions very quick.
And are these associations, the 3 associations, are they the same associations that are running the bus system from Vonderboom? Just to try and understand, are the same associations the associations that are responsible for the dropping off, are they the same associations that are also responsible for the other leg of the transport system, which is the bus system?
Yeah, the bus system, remember how it structures. All affected operators, they will buy shares into the bus operating company. For that matter, yes, they are affected and they are shareholders of the system. But remember, there's still this process that is going between the industry and the government in terms of how are we going to structure the shareholding deal. How much is the share and so professionals are working it out for us.
And what is the duration of these agreements that you have, and what are the lessons or the challenges that you faced ever since the signing of the agreement? So the first part of the question is the duration, and if there are any challenges, if you can just share with the panel any of the challenges that you face since the implementation of the agreement.
Yeah, the duration of the agreement, I think there's no general duration. Let me put it that way. It's forever because they will have to buy. It's 12 years contract. Remember the BRT. It's 12 years contract that we need, but we are not yet on that stage now. We are still in inception for 3 years, inception phase. Now, in terms of you said something again. You can.
Sorry, whether there are any challenges.
The challenges, yes, we do have challenges. And challenges is that the planning part is that you can't start BRT in town. You need to go to communities, into townships. And the BRT in Swan started in town during the previous administration. Now we are faced with that problem, but we've raised it with the city, and we've been asking, why go to Soshanguve whilst you have Atteridgeville, which is 15 kilometers to town? And you want to go to Soshanguve, which is 20 or 25 kilometers. But I think now they've started to